We give you 3 ohms and then do 3 ohms.
Thanksgiving in Eden Prairie is enriched by what has become an ongoing tradition. A sharing and celebration of the diversity that defines a single city and a nation whole. Eden Prairie is a robust suburb southwest of Minneapolis, scenically set along the Minnesota River. Most of Eden Prairie's nearly 65,000 residents have roots in Northern Europe, but families from Pakistan, India, Latin America, the former Soviet Union, and Eastern Africa also call Eden Prairie home. Somali is the second language, and soccer football, well, it's a way of life. Saturdays here and its parks and trail systems, its stores and restaurants reveal flowering diversity. This is certainly the case at the Eden Prairie Community Center with its typically Minnesota array of hockey, swimming, fitness, and meeting facilities.
To discuss, and we can still get you out of here by 3. Thanks.
On April 28th, a conference room full of residents shared their very personal stories at a public gathering of the Interfaith Circle of Eden Prairie.
My name's Zina. I reside in Eden Prairie for the last 19 years.
And I came from Mexico about 20 years ago.
It's something that's kind of evolved over time.
The Circle's idea was to have breakout tables respond to videos that had been recorded beforehand.
Started working with other artists, I realized that
the videos were about the ups and downs of being a minority in Eden Prairie. The program was one expression of the Circle's mission: to share and listen, and share some more, to celebrate the town's diversity and the shared values of its faith communities. Eden Prairie is mostly Protestant and Catholic, but there are also growing numbers of Muslims and other faith communities. Interfaith Circle provides common ground for all, especially during its annual Thanksgiving celebration.
And we are most known for our Thanksgiving gathering that usually happens in November.
Sarah Steichen-Stiles and Salim Adam have helped organize the Thanksgiving events as well as the Interfaith program in April. Becoming One, the power of our stories. They will walk us through and share their thoughts on what was learned.
Hi, welcome. My name is Salim Adam. With me is Sarah Steichen-Stiles. Welcome to the first Interfaith Circle TV show. I was born and raised in Karachi, Pakistan. I moved to USA some 32 years ago. Started in California and moved to Minnesota in 2002. Sarah?
Hi, I'm Sarah, and I was born and raised in Eden Prairie, Minnesota, and went to St. Olaf College, and I am a choreographer, teacher, and dance performer.
Sarah and I are here to talk about an event at Eden Prairie Community Center on April 28th. It was called Becoming One, Power of Our Stories.
I really enjoyed the event. I loved connecting with new people and then seeing some of the faces that we see frequently at our Interfaith Circle events.
Her father
I felt like I learned a lot about our neighbors. People really felt empowered to share stories and were inspired by the stories that we had recorded.
With the theme of the minority where they felt included or excluded, that generated a lot of good conversations.
I agree. Let's go ahead and take a look at the 4 videos. Each begins with an introduction with Trish Sullivan-Vani. Dr. Trish is with the Charis Ecumenical Catholic Community here in Eden Prairie.
I'm so delighted to welcome you, Sharam Misagi, to our show to talk about your experience. I'm wondering if you could share with us an experience you've had where you've somehow felt like you were outside the circle. You were not included in some way in an experience you were having with people at work or in the community.
Well, I can perhaps share with you an example of work-related. At the same time, I always feel myself as part of the group. I always see myself as part of the system, part of the group. But you're right, sometimes you get resistance from other people accepting of who you are. And maybe I can share with a couple of instances about work. I work with different offices, different departments, and many good people in all those places to work with. In one of the places that I've worked with, I have tried to share like my background, where I come from, what language I speak, what are when my new year is and so forth. And strangely enough, no one in the past 12 years has ever asked me like, how do I pronounce my name, or what language do I speak, and so forth. And I can understand it. Perhaps much of it has to do with respect they have for me. They don't want to offend me, and we all worry about if we're saying the proper things to someone is different from us. But at the same time, I think to become one, we need to take the risk and really start the communication and have a conversation with each other. So maybe that's the one area that I wish people would say, oh, okay, tell me more about yourself, so we can learn more about each other.
Why do you think people are hesitant? Do you think they're hesitant because they're scared or indifferent, or what's your sense of the feeling around that people never said to you, well, what was the land in which you were born, or something like that?
Right. I wish I knew the exact answer, but what I think is much of it has to do because all of our senses are heightened by this, everything that's happening around us. And, we see a lot of, I don't want to, not discussions, but a lot of arguments and disunity going on in our societies. And we're fearful maybe of offending the other person if we don't want to highlight somebody being different from us. So we want to say that we see everybody as one, but really it's okay if I reach out to somebody and say, okay, tell me about yourself, tell me about your culture, tell me about your religion, so we can learn from each other. I think that's I think that's the way to becoming one. But I think why we don't do it, maybe because worry about offending each other, or just I wish I knew.
Yeah, I don't know the answer either. I think that's part of why we're getting together this spring to talk.
Exactly, to have a conversation. And I think that's the whole thing. We may not know the answer, but I think together we can find the answer. I think that's the beauty of having a conversation.
How about, in your experience, a time that, in fact, you did feel very pulled in and included?
Fortunately, that happens quite often. Just one of the best experiences I had was just recently, maybe about 2 or 3 weeks ago. I attended a City of Eden Prairie City Council work session. This work session was for the City Council members to sort of interview and get to know a number of us from the community, from the City of Eden Prairie, who are wishing to serve on different committees or commissions at the City of Eden Prairie. And it was wonderful because as we were sitting around the room, there were folks who were born in Somalia who were there. There were people from India. There was me from Iran, and there were people from different states. And the City Council also, they were all there. And everybody was getting together and talking about how can we serve the city or our community better? What can we do to make it better? Just listening to each other. And everyone was striving, to come up with a very nice idea of how we can improve the city. And I thought, wow, this is great. We're all remembering why we're here. We're all striving to serve the community. It was a very positive moment. So I thought that was a very good experience. And they were okay with me being from Iran as well. So that was great.
It's also hard to know us because I guess they also feel like they don't know how we are going to act.
Yeah, people ask me, where are you from? I understand that where you're from indicates you aren't American.
I'm so happy to have you here in Nigadam. You've been around the work of the Interfaith Circle since you were a youngster.
I was so tiny.
You were?
Yeah.
You didn't have a beard then?
No. It would be weird to see a 2-year-old with a beard.
So you know that we're talking about instances of inclusion, exclusion, being part of the group, being pushed to the margins. And that happens along many, many lines. And I'm wondering if you could share with us a little bit about your experience. First, maybe something about a time that you felt singled out and excluded, and then maybe hopefully we'll circle around and hear a story where you felt like you were made to feel like part of the group.
Well, so I've always felt like I've never fit into a group. I've always been like the odd one out. There's been many times where just the way that the vibe in the room was, I just didn't feel like I was part of it. So like I have ADHD, depression, and generalized anxiety. So what that means is basically, you know how in a roller coaster where it's like you're going all the way up to the peak and then it's just about to drop? Now if you take that moment where your heart's about to sink, take that, cut it out, and then put it on a loop for like 10 hours or so, that's pretty much generalized anxiety.
Wow.
But that is very underlying. It kind of pops up into the forefront every time I have, say, a panic attack or a slight bout of anxiety. There have been also times at school, like when I was younger, where I felt like everyone was doing something that I couldn't, or like, and I didn't understand why I couldn't. Just something outside of, like inside of me that I couldn't push through. And even in my family, like when I first was younger, my family didn't quite understand that mental illness was a thing. And they were kind of like, what's wrong with this kid? Like, is something wrong with him? Like, what's going on? And eventually they did understand, but at the time it was just, it didn't feel right on like all different parties, and I didn't feel right. So basically throughout my life I just felt like I was outside of the norm.
And I think that's been the work of a lot of people of your generation, as we've teased out in medicine what are the nature of all these different mental health issues, and how do we support children and youth and young adults to have a healthy participation in life. And we've been really blessed with some remediation. But before that came, I know that in my generation, we often were, well, why doesn't that child control themselves? Or why are they so shy? Pull them out. And we didn't really have the context that we have now. So thank you for sharing that with us.
Also, like when people say, oh, snap out of it, like get over it, it's not as easy as just, hey, get out of there. It's not that easy.
Right. Given that you were living with anxiety and depression and ADHD, do you have any recollection of a time that something shifted and people did help you feel like you were a part of things and important to what was going on?
Definitely when I started doing music. When I started working with other artists, I realized that my situation wasn't really an isolated incident. It was like I was able to relate with others, and whenever I talked to them, I realized that we had the same things in common, how we tend to put other people before our needs, and how that gives us better fulfillment than working on ourselves, which can be both very healthy but also very unhealthy, because if you keep giving up part of yourself, you end up having nothing for yourself. Being overly selfless. Also like anxiety and like stage fright for like artists. I really was like able to connect with other artists. And it was just like really cool to feel like I was part of something. Also Student Senate, I'm part of Normandale Community College Student Senate. Just that whole environment is very diverse, and I felt like I felt into other groups. I felt part of them, and it was really felt good.
Do you think people are more compassionate or more understanding in your generation than in the generations that came before, or are we still really working on that?
Yes and no, because there's still this whole thing where there's still a stigma behind it. Like I know several people who are younger than me who still believe that mental illness is just an excuse to like get by. It really isn't and is not an excuse. It's just the whole stigma is there. It's not really a generational thing per se. It's more of like realizing that mental illness is real. One of my favorite artists, his name is Mike Shinoda, he perfectly said it where mental health is like health. Let's say if you have like a bad back and one day you wake up and it's like, ooh, kind of hurts, gonna take it easy today, or the next day it's like, oh, it's getting worse, I might need to go to the doctor, or I might need to stay in. And then if it gets really bad, you need to talk to a doctor and get like medication or something like that. Same with depression, like I'm feeling kind of depressed today, should take it easy. Treating mental health as health really helps with like reducing the stigma.
But it's something that I have. Sometimes things just aren't quite right, and I'm unable to articulate them correctly or write about them correctly, but it just happens. And I've got a little dyslexia too, so some things happen there from time to time. But to me personally, I'm all past it.
Yeah.
Some people have responses to that, you know, and that's their responses.
But that's normal for you. That's who normal you is.
Yeah. My normal can seem abnormal to some people, and sometimes they have a problem with it, and sometimes they don't.
That doesn't necessarily define who you are, but it explains who you are.
So hopefully, by talking about it more, we can improve the situation.
Sherry Steffen, thank you for joining us. I know that you are a South Dakota girl.
I am a South Dakota girl and I'm proud of it. In fact, that's part of my first story, Trish. As it happens, the first 6 years of my life coincided exactly with the Second World War, at the risk of everybody knowing my age, so it was a secret. But as an only child and the oldest grandchild on both sides, I had to learn to talk with adults because that's who was around. So I had 3 uncles in the service in various theaters of the war, and so always Sunday dinner included a whole 2 hours afterwards sitting on the couch of talking about what we've heard about the various battles going on and that sort of thing. And so I grew up with this whole knowledge of what the Second World War was. Now fast forward to 1960, and I'm a senior in college at the University of Minnesota. I'm a music major in music education, and clarinet is my thing. And so my advisor invited me in one day and asked me to consider being a tutor for the child of a couple of friends of his. This little boy, Josh Siegel, was the son of Jacob and Rachel Siegel, and would I consider being his tutor. He's a 7th grader, and he's kind of advanced, and so he's not getting the kind of lessons he needs to get in his public school setting. I said yes, of course, and so I went to the home of the address that he gave me, and it was out in St. Louis Park, and it was gorgeous, gorgeous big house, and I was really impressed being from the middle of South Dakota. This was big time to me. And so I rang the doorbell, and a maid answered. That too was new to me. And she showed me into kind of a parlor, sitting room kind of an area, and pretty soon here came Jacob and Rachel Siegel and son Josh, 7th grader. And he seemed like he was just a delightful child. And so they wanted, me to write down my name and all that sort of thing. And I have the kind of a name where both the first and last names are often spelled very different ways. So I always say my name is Sherry Steffen, S-H-A-R-I-S-T-E-F-F-E-N, and that's exactly what I said to them that day. And then they talked with me about what would be the materials that I would want to use with their son, technique books and solo materials, and he seemed like he was just kind of a wunderkind, one of those that just kind of shines. And I was getting very excited about him being my student. We kind of wound down toward the end of the interview, and Mr. Siegel got kind of quiet and thoughtful for a while, and pretty soon he looked at me and he said, "Steffen, do you take all students?" And it took me a minute. I mean, I'm all of 21, and I'm thinking, oh, he's Jewish and I'm German. And we're 15 years out from that Second World War, and he's asking me, if this is going to be okay. And I said, oh, yes, of course, you know. And so we made the deal. Well, I realized I'd kind of made it at the Siegel household a few weeks later when I got there for the lesson. And Rachel hollered from her bedroom and said, Sherry, come on in here a minute. I got to ask you something. And she was doing artwork, sitting up in bed like you would see in a movie with all the pillows behind you and all that sort of thing. And she was asking me about her artwork, and I thought, okay, I've made it with these people. It's just wonderful. So that's kind of the end of that story. I felt othered, but then I felt included, you know. And I couldn't tell who was the outs and who was the ins between the German and the Jew there.
My name's Zina. Nice meeting you, Trish. Hi.
Vahi, nice to meet you.
Nice meeting you too.
We are so open over there. You know, you'll see Christians, Hindus, traditional people, whoever, Africans, you know, Muslims, all together. We are friends, not based on our religion, but based on the person you are. Nobody thinks about your religion as the most important. And when I came to this country, that was the first thing that hit me, that my religion was more important than me as a person. And given that if at that time in 1987 they were not open to understanding other religions, I don't see how, if the teachings at that time in whatever church they went to was resistant, I don't know how you're going to come forward and say, now I'm open to learn about you, you know, and you're not going to threaten what my faith is. And so when I see that, I'm like, okay, I understand. Unless it comes from where you are, that openness is not going to be there. As long as you don't feel threatened, as long as you're threatened, you're never going to open up, no matter how much you try.
Nanette Misagi, you are a spiritual writer, a columnist for the Eden Prairie News,
Yes.
so a lot of people may recognize your name and your face.
Thank you. It's a great honor to write for Eden Prairie.
It's super that we have a community that's open to that,
and you too
isn't
as
it?
well.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you are grounded in the Baha'i tradition.
Yes.
And maybe you could tell us just briefly what it is to be Baha'i, and then I'd like to invite you to share an experience or two that you've had of either feeling very much a part of things or somehow outside. So first tell us a little bit about what it is to be Baha'i.
Well, it brings joy to me. I love being a Baha'i. I was born into a Baha'i family, and for me, how I internalize the Baha'i teachings, it's about becoming one, because the basic Baha'i principle is about the oneness of humanity and finding unity in the world. So Baha'is across the planet, we're working towards building peace and love and finding that unity across the differences. A basic principle is unity and diversity. So I really, truly believe that. So it brings me joy and gives me purpose.
So this conversation is really resonant for you as a Baha'i.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit. Now, I'm sure there were times that somehow something came up, and you had mentioned you were Baha'i, and this has been predominantly a Judeo-Christian culture for a long time, although our Muslim community has grown enormously, our Hindu community, our Buddhist community. But share a story with us about maybe a time that suddenly you felt like you were outside of the circle and being treated like you were other than the group.
Yes, and it's very interesting because, you know, I believe in us as one, that we are, you know, all the religions come from the same source. So that's my mantra. And so coming into a place where you're not feeling included, and of course I'm not going to start when I was in kindergarten or first grade, being forced to be an angel in a Christmas play, nothing like that. So that's kind of a joke.
Well, but that was your experience.
That was my
Right.
experience. But I wanted to share something that was a place of work so I was excited to join this new this group of co-workers, and our boss invited us. I guess she was famous for her Christmas parties, so I was excited about that. I was excited to get to know everybody, and she mentioned Secret Santa. I'd heard of Secret Santa but didn't know about it, so I was excited to participate in that. And she had us have a picture where we would wear a Santa mask. And you know, that was all fun. And of course, as I was meeting my coworkers, I shared, you know, that I was a Baha'i, and, you know, how can we have an interfaith opportunity that they could learn about the time that I celebrate and give and things like that. and there was no openness towards that. And so there I was, wanting to participate, wanting to learn, but it was like a closed group. So I truly felt like I was not included because nobody was really interested in how I believed or what my thoughts were about how to celebrate. And we are a very multi-religious organization at the time. And so it took about 2 or 3 years till we got to the point where there was openness to say, okay, because I invited people, please come to my home during a Yamaha, which is right before we fast, and people just simply weren't interested. And then finally it happened, Trish, and it was like a total bummer. Nobody really was interested. Like once, you know, I don't know, but I realized it was just that particular group. They just were not open, as I was open to have that interfaith, learning, because I was so curious, and they were not curious. So that's how I didn't feel included or that I belonged.
It's such a powerful story because it really points to the ways in which sometimes when we're part of a dominant group, it's easier to invite people in to get to know us than it is for us to sort of have the humility to say, yeah, we're the main body here, but we want to know what's true for you, even though you're only one among a larger group.
Yes.
So how about a story of a time that people did respond in a more positive way, and rather than feeling misunderstood or disregarded, you felt pulled in to the community?
Well, I'm really excited to share this very recent story because we just, as Baha'is, finished the Baha'i fasting period, and we ended with Nowruz, which is the Baha'i New Year. So everybody at work knew that I was fasting, and I'd say I'd get droopy at around 2 o'clock, you know. But my boss, Jay, did something very special that really touched my heart, Trish, and what he did, it was just so simple. He was scheduling a meeting with a group of people in our organization. I work for Minneapolis Community Technical College, and they chose a date that was Nowruz. And so he wrote back and said, and he copied me on this, and he said, well, this is Nanette's Baha'i holy day. She's not working on this day, and this is a well-deserved time off. I mean, he actually, remembered that I was a Baha'i, he spelled it correctly, and he knew that it was a holy day. I was absolutely touched, Trish, like, so that whole group would know, and I thought, wow, he took the time to actually care. And then, to top it off, you don't believe I got at least 3 or 4 texts from my coworkers. Happy Nowruz, they had the correct spelling, they knew that I was done fasting, and they were celebrating with me. And I'm getting a little teary-eyed because it really, really, really touched my heart. Simple things like that, that's how I feel included.
Right.
Wow.
And sometimes we think it's going to be something enormous, but being seen, and being honored for who you are, and for your traditions, is such a powerful gesture of inclusion.
And simple.
Right.
It didn't take money, didn't take any accommodation. It just came from somebody's heart.
That's beautiful.
Yes, thank you.
It was exciting to see the different ethnicities, cultures, background on the table conversations. Even though I was running around taking pictures of discussions at the table, I heard a lot of this conversation and enjoyed those discussions.
I think most people are just curious to know more about you, and that's how they start a conversation. So where are you from?
And I'm scared, like internally, I don't want to say the wrong thing. I don't want to use you guys, or I don't want to use the wrong name for something, or you know. And so I'm like,
I guess for them it's also hard to know us because I guess they also feel like they don't know how we are gonna act. You know, what customs we have, what we should do, or
afraid to offend you.
Right. So it's kind of hard that. So I think sometimes it's good just to open ourselves, and that's what I do. I like to.
And I think if we take that approach, and it will make it a lot easier.
Or and so I'm like hemming and hawing my way through this conversation, and as they left, I was even thinking like, did I do that right, or did I just totally burn a bridge, or what, And
when I talk about practicing Islam, that I'm practicing Islam 2.0 because it's I am influenced by Catholicism. I have I also am a very middle of the road person. I subscribe to many Buddhist principles, and of course I have a very core Islamic upbringing. So I feel that it's a really nice fusion, and there's no tension or any confusion about what it should be, and so it seems that.
So my simple story. First of all, my name is Zina. I reside in Eden Prairie for the last 19 years. I'm a mom. I'm Arabic. I'm Muslim. I'm minority. I'm all the thing can put me down. But I made it with good people, with wonderful people who are being there for me, helping my kids. When I came here in 2000, I've been told this is the Christian land and I cannot survive. I made it with my Jewish friend. I made it with my Christian friend. I made it with my Baha'i friend. I made it with all others. But it doesn't make me still feel good because I still suffer from not being included. In response to that video about my holiday as a Muslim, I work in a company, I don't want to name it, but when their holiday, I write a gift card with little happy holiday words. I greet them, each one of them. I'm the only Muslim in the store. I don't know if I'm in the company. When it's my Ramadan, when it's my holiday, I've been ignored. I haven't heard from my coworker. I haven't heard from my bosses. I haven't heard from no one. All what I ask, can I adjust my schedule because I need to go home and cook my food, and because I'm fasting, because it's Ramadan, right? Oh, yeah, you can go home. That's all. It could be better. It could be, Zina, have a happy iftar. Oh, tell me a little bit about Ramadan, even if you don't like it. But I ask you about yours. Make me feel that my choice was correct. Make me feel that I am American. Guess what? I am either people like it or don't, because I stand for United States. I stand for other faith. I stand with all my friends, but I still suffer from not being included. I'm still hurt that when I go to the supermarket, I can't find a card to tell me Happy Eid. When I go out, I'm still treated as a dark hair, thinking that I'm a Jewish, but as soon as I say I'm a Muslim, oh, you are. And that, oh, it kills me. When I go back to Tunisia, I lecture them about how wonderful the Christians are. I never said one negative about what I live. I made my kids have all the other friends, and I still do. I will still stand for other faith. But I wish this room has more Christian and more Jewish than minority. That's how I will feel included. Why there is still minority here? When I came here in 2000 and September 11 happened, I was escorted to the office and I was in ESL classroom with other people. And when they tell me, you need to go to the office, I thought, oh my gosh, because I'm Muslim. I find out that because they want to protect us, because there was someone said something about Muslim. From that day, the lady who protected me, her name Kathy Cohen, from the Education Center representing the ESL, she was the one made me love every Jewish and Christian friend. She was my first protection, and she was individual. She's not lawmaker, she's not elected official, but she believed in her heart. And here I am today. I'm in defense of every religion, and if any one Muslim say something about other faith, I will stand against my Muslim friend. That's how I am. Thank you for listening to my story.
So Sarah, how did these videos and the discussions that were held at the event affected you? What did you take away from that?
I thought there was a common theme of people acknowledging that there's a barrier, right? We all want to be known, we all want to be seen, we all want to feel included. That's a human desire. But there are these barriers that seem to divide us. And there seems to be, some of the barriers are in our head. Sometimes we make these assumptions about other people or what other people are thinking of us. And I think also we have these barriers that we're scared to reach out and connect with people in fear that we might somehow offend them in our questions or our response. And so there's these invisible walls that we're interested in breaking down. And I heard that again and again in stories. And I think Nanette's story was interesting. She talked about very specific experiences in her workplace and acknowledged that just little small moments of people recognizing, celebrating her religious holidays with her meant the world to her. So I think it's really small little steps that help us to lead to becoming one. But I think we have some steps to go in trying to figure out what these barriers are and breaking them down. What did you experience?
Well, my experience was pretty much the same. So we saw the stories where people are, sometimes they felt excluded, sometimes they felt included. Mm-hmm. But they also gave us this, at the table discussions, that what are some of the things that we can do differently. Like you said, there are some things that are perceived, and sometimes perception is the reality, but not always. Mm-hmm. So we need to go a little deeper. It's all can be done through conversations. The thing about the mental illness, there is more awareness, mm-hmm. but people are still reluctant. There's some sort of a stigma still attached to it. So people are not coming forth talking about their own experiences, as the gentleman on the video. And sometimes the people who are at the other end, they are not taking the initiative to understand. Mm-hmm. Like you said in the video, that mental illness should be taken as a physical illness. So you don't tell people with a broken ankle, get over it. So be careful when you're talking to the person with a mental illness that, treat it as a broken ankle and show that sympathy. Sometimes I feel that, get that sense of exclusion, mm-hmm. Or not being treated fairly. But I don't live in that moment and say, okay, I've been excluded, I need to stay here. I still continue those conversations that why is it just my perception or is it the reality? If it's my perception, then I can go and, there is no issue whatsoever. But if it's the reality, then I want to make sure that I do my part. Am I communicating openly and highlighting what I'm feeling and get the response back, just to make sure that the other party understands that I'm getting that sense of exclusion and try to bridge that gap.
So you would have a conversation with the community that you feel excluded from versus removing yourself from it? Exactly right, yes. Mm-hmm. Removing is not allowing the other people chance that, there's somebody who's feeling that he's being excluded. Mm-hmm. So allowing that, remove that gap, and if it's just a perception, then remove that perception and become part of that bigger and has that worked positively for
yes,
you? That
like
people have embraced the conversation?
Yes, it has. Because as we started in the beginning, you said that there's sometimes we put the barriers ourselves, or we perceive there is a barrier and we don't want to go past that. That conversation needs to include, you need to be persistent. There is work that needs to be done. There is effort that needs to be made. So it needs to be a lot more work than just sensing how you're feeling it and step away and say, I was excluded. I want to make sure that is this my perception or is it the reality? And that can be accomplished through dialogue.
This organization, Interfaith Circle, began in response to 9/11. I specifically remember 9/11. I was at Eden Prairie High School in math class when the TV was turned on and we watched the crash. And I went into the hallway for passing time, and people were all talking, and it was chaos. The end of the world is coming, and ignorant Sarah that grew up in Eden Prairie, pretty white dominant community, mostly Christians, was like, the world's not ending, no big deal. And as the day passed and I watched more news and more news, I went to bed that night and said my prayers as if that was the last sleep I was gonna have here on earth. And so from that moment on, there was a curiosity in me and a awareness of how much larger the world was, right? Went to St. Olaf College, went on global semester, spent 6 months traveling east until we ended up back home. Specifically when I was in India, we studied the religions of India. And I remember we'd have a speaker from different faiths come in, and you know, they would share about their personal traditions and values, and I remember specifically the Zoroastrians came in and they spoke about their worship of fire, and I sat there and I just thought, this is crazy. This sounds crazy. People really do this. And then I took a step back and I was like, Sarah, imagine you standing in front of a room of Zoroastrians. And you're gonna tell them that your savior makes water into wine, parts the Red Sea, walks on water. Sounds just as crazy, right? And so that planted another seed that was like, wow, there is other ways of embracing faith, spirituality. We can get really comfortable in what we have been exposed to and what we've been raised in. But my love and curiosity for where other people are coming from and their perspectives, and trying to put myself in their shoes, has always helped me embrace differences. I think differences are exciting. If I used to go to a park in Eden Prairie when I was a kid, everyone, you know, we looked pretty homogenous. We spoke English. You now can go to Starring Lake Park and you can hear about 15 different languages spoken as you walk the circle, right? And to me, that's exciting. That means there's like, we can just learn so much more. And I just hope that people can see differences as an invitation to grow. Yeah, because we need to do that with ourselves all the time, right? Like,
and I agree. That's very, it's a phenomenal thought, right? Because we see when we say other, that's right there. You brought the wall in. Like, you know, my faith teaches me that we were all created from a single soul, right? Meaning every human being was created. We were created, and then we divide ourselves into tribes and nations. So there are differences, but these differences could be used as a dividing factor. But like you said, you know, it's understanding the differences, the beauty of understanding each other and accepting each other. There used to be a word called that we should tolerate each other, and I think that's the wrong connotation. We need to accept each other. There is acceptance and beauty in how different people of different cultures, different ethnicities, and different faith, how they practice. So it was an excellent example that, you know, how could a Zoroastrian believe in something that was crazy for you, but you took a moment, step back and say, you know, my faith does something, this could be equally crazy for somebody else who's looking from outside in.
Interfaith Circle of Eden Prairie seeks to foster understanding and celebrate the diversity of our faith traditions.
Thank you for watching the show. I hope it was as beneficial and as educational as it was for me. It was very beneficial to me personally.
There are many ways for you to get in touch with us, and we would love to see you at one of our upcoming events.
We'd love to hear from you. We're on Facebook and have a website. It's at interfaithcircle.wordpress.com. That's interfaithcircle.wordpress.com.